This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of our investment group, and your host of tonight with Frank Islam. Today, we're fortunate to have a distinguished guest, Imtiaz Gul. Imtiaz, thank you for coming. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for coming.
Welcome.
Okay, so let's just start our conversation by asking you, uh, tell me a little bit about yourself for our audience. Our audience is global, who you are, what you do, and where do you live, and so on and so forth. Go ahead.
Uh, I've been a journalist. I began my career in 1985 with the German public broadcaster Deutsche Welle. Worked for this network in Germany as well as out of Pakistan for nearly 25 years, and then began uh, my own think tank, Center for Research and Security Studies, in 2008. And ever since, I have combined the two roles as a think tanker as well as a writer. I'm still the editor strategic affairs for one of Pakistan's English language dailies, the Daily Times.
Oh, Daily Times, where I publish my column, right?
Yes.
So, thank you very much for the brief background that you've given, and you have a very distinguished career. So, I want to start out talking to you about shedding some bright lights on US-Pakistan and Afghanistan relationship. What went wrong? What we hit it? What do we need to do to correct the situation?
Well, this has been an unequal relationship between a superpower and a developing country which finds itself in a very strategic geographical location. So, on the one hand, uh, Pakistan became instrumental in the geopolitics as pursued by the United States, beginning particularly with the 1979 invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union. And immediately thereafter, Pakistan became a willing instrument in the US response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And then, uh, like 10 years down the lane, both countries became sort of estranged once the Soviet troops pulled out of Afghanistan, and the US slapped some economic sanctions on Pakistan for uh, working on the nuclear program, for developing nuclear weapons. And then another 10 years down the lane, Pakistan again became instrumental in the war against terrorism, which the United States launched against Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. And all along, there have been undue expectations of Pakistan, and I think also by Pakistan as well as by the United States, which basically made this relationship uneven, and it continues to remain bitter, a relationship that is fraught with hostility, I would say, as well as deep suspicion on both sides.
So, uh, obviously, you look at the brighter horizon for the US-Pakistan relationship as we move forward. I see it brighter horizon. I think that the United States needs Pakistan, and Pakistan needs United States. So they need to work together.
Yeah,
Correct?
obviously, they need to work together. This is how the bilateral or multilateral relationships work. And these relationships usually are need driven. Uh, the United States has its own needs of Pakistan, and so has Pakistan. This is how it has been evolving. However, then at times one partner looks at the other as demanding too much. And when this too much view creeps into the relationship, then obviously it becomes sour, it becomes uneven, and it also becomes sort of acrimonious at times, the way we have seen, particularly the last 10 years or so, ever since Osama bin Laden, for instance, was detected and eliminated in Pakistan in 2011, 2nd of May. And then there was a lot of bickering, and all sorts of guns were directed at Pakistan for having hosted Osama bin Laden. And there was a quite huge hue and cry. So this still remains a mystery as to whether Pakistan did provide some institutional support to Osama bin Laden to hide out in just
Well,
about 100 kilometers north of Pakistan, north of Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan.
I believe that the past is a history, not a destiny, and they need to move forward. But I want to shift my gear to talk about why the United States or even Russians and everybody else taking Pakistan out of the Taliban talks. Do you think is helping that process or is it hurting the process? And I saw not too long ago, even the Russians are involved in Taliban peace process. Correct?
Yeah, Pakistan occupies a very central strategic geographical location as well as political location.
Yes.
It has a 2,560-kilometer long border with Afghanistan, which is as much important as the Mexican border to the United States or the Canadian border to the United States. And this geographical proximity between Afghanistan and Pakistan has largely defined Pakistan's approach towards Afghanistan, regardless whether the United States is engaged with Afghanistan or India or, for that matter, any other country. So, what Pakistan does is largely defined by this closeness to Afghanistan, and Pakistan has its own concerns as well as interests in this neighboring country. And I think this is the disconnect between the United States and Pakistan, because the US has always tended to look at such interventions as a project where they can move away after a particular time frame, whereas Pakistan cannot walk away. Pakistan has to live with the tribes which inhabit both sides of the border, which are closely related. There are friendships, relationships across the border. So it's not an easy task. I think it's unfathomable for any Pakistani government or the Pakistani security apparatus just to look the other way from what is happening in Afghanistan. So it cannot really go by the ambitions or by the desires or the dictation by any other country as far as its own security concerns are concerned.
So what are you saying that the Pakistan has to be an integral part of the peace process as far as the Taliban is concerned? My question is also, as you know, Representative Zalmay Khalilzad, who's a dear friend of mine for a long, long time. What part is he playing in terms of Taliban peace process? Do you think his effort will pay off? Do you think where he's headed right now?
I think it will be premature to say whether Zalmay Khalilzad's mission delivers according to the expectations of the Trump administration. He has been a sort of anti-Pakistan US diplomat. Now, I think he has mellowed down. He looks at Pakistan again positively, just because Pakistan has a key role. And it's not, as I explained earlier, just because of the Taliban. It's because Afghanistan's largest ethnic majority is Pashtun. They
Yes.
constitute more than, I think, 50% of the entire population. So Pakistan, I think, will look at Afghanistan as a country which has a large ethnic community, very closely related to this side of the border as well. So it's this ethnic dimension of the issue that keeps Pakistan engaged. And secondly, Zalmay Khalilzad, as well as most key post holders, office holders at the moment in Afghanistan, are ethnic Pashtuns. And there is a suspicion, I think, among the non-Pashtun Afghans right now that somehow the Pashtuns have taken over the entire process, and they are holding out an olive branch to the Taliban. So uh, that's what makes Zalmay Khalilzad's mission a little difficult, because he would not be looked at by the non-Pashtuns, who, by the way, occupy very important mid-rank positions within the security establishment of Afghanistan. So while the intentions are noble, while the need to re-engage Pakistan and use its influence for negotiations with the Taliban uh, has re-emerged and has been re-emphasized, we have to bear in mind that we still have a lot of detractors, not only inside of Afghanistan but also in the United States, who can play as spoilers of the peace process, which has given us some hope in the last few weeks.
Great. And I think you have articulated your thoughts very well, but I would hope they will set aside the differences in terms of their, they belong to the same, the Pashtuns, and to come up with the idea that because we all have a shared goals and shared responsibility to make sure that the peace process proceed as it conceived to be, and it will be in the interest of Pakistan as well as Afghanistan to make sure they can move forward together. I'd like to talk a little bit about what role do you think India is playing in terms of building the Afghanistan, and what is it for them? What makes them to do something, and what motivates them to do that?
Well, it's obviously Pakistan. They want to have a very safe strategic backyard Pakistan, where they have their footprint, where they can influence the events across the border. So it's again a geopolitical relationship that India has stitched with Afghanistan together with the United States. I mean, Afghanistan and India are two independent countries. They have all the right to have whatever sort of relationship they want to have. But the primary reason I would say for the engagement of India in Afghanistan remains very much Pakistan for geopolitical reasons. And number two, what we have seen in the last 10 years or so is the involvement of India in Afghanistan with a number of militant actors. Uh, I think perhaps to settle scores with Pakistan for Pakistan's Kashmir policy, where we have seen an insurgency raging since 1988, and India believes that this is being supported directly by Pakistan, and I think this Kashmir remains at the heart of the India-Pakistan rivalry, and this is what perhaps irks and hurts India, and they have chosen basically to ally themselves with Afghanistan, because that provides them a good springboard for whatever intervention they can make in Pakistan. And there have been strategic thinking about it. About 10 years ago, a lot of security analysts, former ambassadors, including India's current national security advisor, when he had retired, they've all been advising their governments to use Afghanistan and Pakistan's Balochistan province for pricking Pakistan, for weakening Pakistan, and for settling scores with Pakistan, so that Pakistan cannot pose a threat to India.
Talk a little bit about, do you see any brighter horizon between the Pakistan-India relationship? I know the India canceled that meeting, was supposed to be the foreign minister. So what is your thoughts? I mean, they're the same people, they belong to the same, they have same background, and why can they get along? And where do we go from here in terms of reestablishing the relationship?
Well, if you look at the world, it's moving more inwards. If you look at the United States, look at India, look at Turkey, there's a lot more nationalism being witnessed today than, say, 10 years ago. This is what has happened in India, like all right wing uh, parties, including the ultra right, like RSS and Shiv Sena, they are part of this right wing government. And this government has taken a very, um, sorry, you have to wait. Yeah, that looks okay, na? Give me a minute, right? Bana kaza Simba wala shi danna ka. Telko Simba naste ka na. Okay, sorry, because we had so many guests today, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
we're still feeling the heat of the guests. So I
Okay.
chose this room.
Okay.
So, okay, let's take this question again on why can't they improve the relationships? Yeah, this is what you
Right.
asked.
Well, my
So
question is really,
basically,
do you see a brighter horizon between relationship between India and Pakistan, and considering the fact that the India had to schedule a meeting, they cancel it. Now, how do we go? How do we move forward so that they both, so that we can take the next step? They can take the next step to have relationship, because it is in interest of Islamabad as well as Delhi to have the relationship.
yeah, obviously, it's always in the interest of neighbors to be talking, to stay engaged. But at the moment, the kind of relationship that we have with India is absolutely at its lowest. Never before have we seen such a cold phase of diplomacy. And also, the next few months don't promise much just because the Indian government or India is now going into an election
Election.
mode. They would have elections in May, June next year. And
Right.
the ruling coalition already fears loss of a substantial number of seats in the parliament, which it currently dominates with the support of all right wing parties. And this makes the situation look pretty bleak, just because in India, Pakistan is always an election topic, an election theme. Whereas
But
in
that
Pakistan,
energized the
we
base.
never had, yeah, so we in Pakistan, we never had India as a central theme. This is the irony of the situation. And also in Pakistan, we never had the far right ever get more than 6 7% of the entire vote. Whereas in India, this 60% of the vote went to all these right wing parties in the last election, and hence their coalition right now. And this upcoming election in India makes it pretty dismal for the bilateral relationship, and we don't hope that there could be any even smaller breakthrough in this relationship, particularly because the Indian government, the current Indian government, has very systematically tried to cut out Pakistan and Pakistanis from every possible forum inside India as well as outside India. It has done all it can to exclude Pakistan from almost every forum. It has not given visas, for instance, to sportsmen, to artists, and now practically somebody from the Indian diplomatic circles told me that right now it's practically zero visa regime for Pakistan, which basically shows this hostile mood in which we find the current Indian government, and this is what makes us quite pretty pessimistic.
So you don't really see any brighter horizon even after the election outcome, which is in May or June, unless the things substantially change in terms of the formation of the government. Correct?
You know, you can hope for brighter horizons only when you see positive vibes coming out of the respective capitals. But at the moment, there isn't any single positive vibe coming out of New Delhi, and all will depend on the complexion of the future government, whether the BJP can retain its hold on the parliament, and whether it then recalibrates whether it reviews its posturing vis-a-vis Pakistan. I would say that if BJP managed to win election with good majority, perhaps it would deem it better to review its policy and extend the hand for re-engagement.
What is your thoughts on the Modi government embracing the Hindu nationalism and attacking in terms of the faith and religion, and also the mob lynching which is going on against the Muslims? What's your thought on that?
Well, it has
Attack
been
on one
quite
faith.
disturbing.
It is.
It has been quite disturbing, I think, for everybody, whether here in Pakistan or elsewhere, particularly in Europe, where faith is totally considered as exclusively individual's domain and an individual's right. So where politics has nothing to do basically with religion. But what we have seen in India is the deployment of faith as an instrument of policy against all the non-Hindu minorities, whether they are Muslims or Christians or Sikhs. And this has made the Indian political landscape actually extremely dangerous. And this is evident also from the media as well as other branches of intelligentsia, including the academia, where a lot of people, a lot of leading people have turned basically into conformists just for fear of reprisals. I think there are a number of Indian writers who have been writing about how the Indian secular political pendulum has moved rightwards and injected a lot of fear into the minds of other citizens just because this was a democracy which was touted as secular. And I think a lot of Indians, the majority of Indians, took pride in being part of a secular democracy. But that modicum of secularism, I think, has been blown away and has been replaced by ultra right wing politics, which basically looking more inwards. And that when you start looking inwards, that means you start otherizing the outsiders, whether it's the non-Hindus or whether it's the people across the borders.
Well, let me say my personal view on this thing. First of all, attack on one faith is attack on all faith. Today, the Muslims or the minorities are victim. Tomorrow, somebody else will be the victim. When we tear apart the harmonious fabric of of India, it will backfire them. So people should not be discriminated because of their faith. They should not be confronted to hostility and a prejudice, because India needs to understand that if you give them the economic mobility and inclusive opportunity to the 200 million Muslims and 200 million Dalits and the Christians, if they succeed, India succeed and the world succeed. And that's something I do
I mean,
not think that they realize that. Go ahead.
this is absolutely right. There are no two opinions about it. Um, you have to look at people as equal citizens in a particular state. And the states really can't differentiate between its citizens as lesser citizens and superior citizens based on religion. So somehow we have to, I think, somehow keep peddling the idea of equal citizenry independent of somebody's individual faith. And this is what we're trying to do in Pakistan. This is what we should stand for. Otherwise, there will be no end to sectarian hatreds, to
I
linguistic,
love it.
ethnic hatred.
You're absolutely right. Before we leave the conversation, I want to ask you a last question. The questions in terms of the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iran. Do you see a good vibe, a horizon that will basically involve Pakistan and Afghanistan working together in the near future?
Well, it again boils down to geopolitics. If bigger countries like the United States could, I think, take a step back and let the regional countries like Pakistan, China, Russia uh, craft a new way forward for the Afghan reconciliation, and including India.
Right.
If they could allow the regional actors to move forward, perhaps things could change. But as we saw from the Moscow dialogue the last couple of days, there's
Right.
again some division. And if the United States approves of this process, supports it, as well as India, I think it could trigger, unleash a new dynamic for Afghanistan, and it would also, I think, open some space for better relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We have to understand that the Americans, the Indians, they all looking at Pakistan through the Afghan prism, and they believe that whatever has gone wrong in Afghanistan is because of Pakistan. And as long as they stick to this belief, I don't think there'll be much change in the situation as far as Afghanistan is concerned. The world is right now divided in two big uh, blocks: Pakistan, China, Russia, Turkey, and Iran on the one hand, and India, the US, and Afghanistan on the other. And this is what keeps, I think, the pot boiling. This is what would keep Afghanistan also on the boil if all these stakeholders didn't join forces to find a negotiated settlement for Afghanistan.
Well, thank you very much, Imtiaz, for your conversation, and you have a very uh, a view that I think that will be shared by the wider audience all over the world. So, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all you're doing
Thank
to
you for
make a
having me.
difference. Thank you very much for all you're doing to make a difference and you're making an impact, influence on people's lives. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.